So usually when we talk about trying to build a good life, there's this, underlying assumption that it's going to be like a buffet.
Right. Yeah, buffet.
Yeah, like you take a little mindfulness here, maybe some career ambition over there, perhaps a dash of stoicism, and you just sort of, I don't know, build your own customized plate.
Exactly. And if something doesn't fit your lifestyle, you leave it under the heat lamp and move on to the next tray.
Right, exactly.
It is a very comforting approach, honestly. I mean, we naturally want a life philosophy that, bends to accommodate our specific circumstances or our flaws, our modern schedules.
Totally. But what happens when the buffet is closed?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because today we're doing a deep dive into a text from 2010 by an author named Feng, and it's titled The Ways to Obtain Joy, Happiness, Freedom, and Blessing.
A very bold title.
Right. And what makes this deep dive so compelling and frankly like a little jarring is that it completely rejects that customizable approach we were just talking about.
It really does. It's zero compromise.
Yeah, it treats life as a game with very specific, uncompromising, almost mathematical rules for winning. Like, if you don't follow the exact formula, you don't get the reward. It is that stark.
Yeah, but before we get, too far into the mechanics of this game, we really need to set some context for you, the listener, on what you're actually about to hear today.
Good idea.
Because this text operates with some very distinct spiritual and philosophical concepts. Throughout the material, the author mentions holding things like the greatest creator in awe. He references terms like dharma and, draws on a variety of broader belief systems.
Right.
So we want to make it super clear that we are going to explore this author's framework entirely objectively today.
Yeah, we're not endorsing anything here.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any of the theological or ideological viewpoints presented, nor are we really critiquing them from a specific religious lens.
Right. The goal is just to map out the architecture of this specific philosophy, dissect its internal logic, and really just understand how the author connects these ideas to form this rigid game of life.
Spot on.
Okay, so if life is a game, according to this text, how do we even, get to the starting line? Because the author makes it very clear that you can't just stumble onto the board and expect to start accumulating joy or blessing.
Oh, definitely not.
There's this hefty entry fee.
A massive one, yeah. I'd argue the preconditions for even beginning this journey are the most difficult part of the entire framework.
Wow, really? The start is the hardest part.
Honestly, yes. The text starts with a baseline, which is that you must hold the greatest creator, life, and nature in deep respect and awe.
Okay, sure.
But from there, it shifts into this really aggressive, active purging of the self. The author states you have to completely eradicate contention, fighting, comparison, jealousy, complaint, and the desire for possession.
Okay, let's unpack this because getting rid of all those traits isn't just a minor attitude adjustment.
No, not at all.
I mean, it's asking you to dismantle almost every defensive mechanism modern society teaches us to use,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're taught to compare ourselves to others, to measure our success. We're taught to fight for our share. If you take all of that away, you are incredibly vulnerable.
You are. You really are. And the author actually acknowledges that vulnerability, but he frames it as a necessary emptying. It's like a total clearing of the board. You just cannot hold on to the heavy machinery of modern ambition and simultaneously navigate the subtle currents of nature.
Right. It sounds like trying to install a new operating system. You can't run the happiness software if your hard drive is all clogged up with the malware of jealousy and ego.
That is a perfect analogy, actually, yes. But the text actually goes much further than just abandoning jealousy.
Yeah, that's the part that really made me stop and reread the paragraph. Yeah, because the author provides this fascinating, almost dizzying string of terms. The text asks the reader to try their absolute best to be free from, and I'm quoting here, an ego, a personality, a being, a life, a dharma, a non-dharma.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I mean, shedding the ego, I can sort of grasp, right? The shedding a personality,
Yeah.
shedding a dharma and a non-dharma. Like, how does a person possibly exist without a personality or an ego? What does that even mean in this context?
Well, what's fascinating here is how absolute the author demands your neutrality to be.
Okay.
Let's break down those terms because they are crucial to everything else. So in many Eastern philosophies, a dharma generally refers to a cosmic law or like a rigid duty or a fixed system of belief.
Like the set path you're supposed to walk.
Exactly. So to be free from a dharma is to reject rigid dogmatic rules. But then the author adds non-dharma.
Which would mean, wait, being free from the dogma of having no dogma.
Precisely. You can't even get attached to the identity of being a rebel who rejects rules because that in itself becomes a new rigid identity.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, the text is demanding complete mental flexibility. It explicitly instructs that your mind should, quote, not reside anywhere, but blend with nature.
So it's about not crystallizing into any shape at all.
Right.
Which I guess explains the personality part. If you think about it, trying to run the race of life while fiercely defending a personality is, it's like trying to run a marathon while wearing a full suit of medieval armor.
Oh, that is a highly accurate way to visualize it. I love that.
Right, like you're technically in the race,
Yeah.
but you're spending 90% of your energy just holding up the weight of the steel.
Yeah.
You curate your tastes, you defend your opinions in the comment sections online, you carefully manage how people perceive you. That armor is incredibly heavy.
Quite exhausting.
Right. Eventually, you're going to just collapse from the sheer exhaustion of wearing it long before you reach any finish line.
And that exhaustion is exactly what the author is trying to prevent. The core thesis here is explicitly stated. He says, the process of life is a game, and we should be good at playing games. So if you're dragging around this massive boulder of your ego, your jealousies, and your carefully constructed personality, you are quite simply too heavy to play.
You just can't move.
Right. By removing all of that, you become light. You stop fighting the flow of nature and you start blending with it. And it's only when you achieve that absolute weightless neutrality that you meet the baseline requirement to actually play the game.
Wow. Okay. So if we assume we've successfully stripped off that heavy armor, which, by the way, is obviously a monumental task on its own.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But say we do it. We are now completely neutral. We're at square one. How does the author say we actually start scoring points? Because the text makes a surprisingly sharp distinction between two concepts that, frankly, we normally lump together: joy and happiness.
Yeah, in everyday conversation, those words are practically synonyms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in the architecture of this text, they are completely different mechanisms. They require entirely different environments, and they are triggered by entirely different actions.
Right. So the author draws this hard line, starting with joy. And it is a definitive, almost aggressive claim. The text says it is impossible to find joy alone, period.
Yep.
It also states it's impossible to find it with mismatched people. It dictates that joy must be found in a collective that shares your exact frequency and resonance. Like you have to work, study, play, and live with this specific group.
It is a very uncompromising view of human connection. The author views joy as a strictly communal resonance.
And okay, I have to push back on this absolute rule for a second.
Sure.
The text says a person can never get joy by living alone. Wait, really? What about the introverts listening to this?
I know, it sounds harsh.
Right, because for a massive portion of the population, the idea of having to constantly live, work, and play with a group doesn't sound like joy at all. It sounds like a fast track to sensory overload and total burnout. Does the text really leave no room for solitary joy?
Within the strict logic of this framework, it leaves absolutely no room.
Wow.
But we have to look closely at the mechanism the author is describing here. It's not about extroversion versus introversion. It's not about throwing a giant party and socializing just for the sake of it.
Okay, so what is it about?
The key phrase you read is frequency and resonance.
Ah, okay. So it's about the quality of this signal, not the volume.
Yes, exactly. Think about what actually drains an introvert.
Right, the small talk, the masking.
Yeah, it's usually the cognitive dissonance of interacting with people who require them to put their armor back on, people who force them to perform, or who operate on a fundamentally different emotional wavelength.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. The author warns against exactly that. The text insists you cannot get joy from living with people who don't share your frequency.
So it's almost like physics. Like joy is the vibration between matching tuning forks.
Oh, yeah.
If you strike a tuning fork in an empty room, it just eventually fades out, right?
Yeah.
Because you're alone. And if you strike it next to a tuning fork cut to a different frequency, you get a discordant clashing sound.
Yes.
But if you strike it next to a fork cut to the exact same frequency, they both hum, they resonate, they amplify each other.
That is the exact mechanism the text is describing. Joy is that sympathetic vibration. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, which is why the author says you can't find it alone.
Right?
And it doesn't exist in dissonance, which is why you can't find it with mismatched people. It only physically manifests when you are actively resonating with a collective on your specific wavelength.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because if joy is entirely dependent on this external resonance with our community, what happens when we're alone?
Yeah, good question.
Are we just doomed to be miserable until we find our tuning forks? That brings us to the second pillar, happiness. And the text pivots completely away from the community here. The author links happiness purely to labor and creation.
Yep.
The text states outright that a lazy person who doesn't work will never understand what happiness is.
It is another absolute statement. Joy requires a collective, but happiness is a completely internal engine driven by exertion.
But this runs directly counter to how we are conditioned to view work.
How so?
Well, we usually think of labor as the thing standing in the way of our happiness. Like, oh, I'll be happy on Friday at 5 p.m. when I can finally stop working, or I'll be happy when I'm on a beach doing absolutely nothing.
Right, right.
But the author is arguing that labor is the actual engine of happiness.
Yeah, and this raises a really important question about human nature versus the philosophy of this text. Because why do we crave that beach?
Right. Why do we want to just sit there?
Well, biologically, human beings are wired to conserve calories. If we don't have to expend energy, our bodies tell us to rest. So passive relaxation feels good in the short term.
Sure.
But the text makes a profound distinction between physical rest and spiritual or psychological happiness.
Right, because rest is just pausing. It isn't generating anything.
Exactly. The text's view is that happiness isn't passive relaxation. It is an active byproduct of earnest endeavor. It states, and I quote, "Only those who engage them actively in work and creation can experience the feeling of happiness in their own labor."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when you create something, whether it's writing code, cultivating a garden, framing a house, or raising a child, you are taking your internal potential and forcing it out into the physical world.
Yeah, there's a friction there, right? You have to overcome the resistance of the raw materials, of the blank page or whatever.
And that creative friction is the source of the heat. That active engagement with reality through your own effort is what generates the internal state the author defines as happiness.
Ah, I see.
A lazy person cannot feel it, not because the author is passing a moral judgment on laziness, but because the lazy person literally isn't operating the machinery required to produce the feeling.
Okay, that makes sense. So joy is external resonance with your people, and happiness is internal resonance with your work and creation.
Exactly.
They really are two completely different mechanisms.
Yes.
But wait, if my joy relies entirely on finding my specific community and my happiness relies entirely on my ability to choose my labor, what happens when society gets in the way? What happens when I'm born into a town where no one shares my frequency, or economic reality forces me into a job that just crushes my soul?
Yeah.
How do I defend my right to those tuning forks in that creative labor?
That dilemma pushes us directly into the author's third pillar, which is perhaps the most intense and combative phase of this entire roadmap: freedom.
Combative is definitely the right word, because the language the author uses here shifts dramatically from harmonious resonance to, fierce defense.
He really does.
The text gives these stark warnings. Freedom does not fall from the sky. It is not a handout. And then it gives a comprehensive list of threats. It says that when a theory, a sermon, a way of thinking, a program, a system, an individual, or a group restricts your soul, spirit, or flesh, you must firmly and resolutely say no.
Yeah. It is a mandate for radical autonomy. The author posits that you have an inherent right to this freedom, but the world is basically designed to encroach upon it.
Right.
And no one is going to maintain those boundaries for you. You have to do it.
But there's a glaring contradiction here that I need you to explain.
Okay, let's hear it.
The mission statement of this text, the very title, promises a happy, free, and blessed life. That implies serenity, right?
Right.
But then the author explicitly states that gaining this freedom requires paying a heavy cost. The text mentions going through great affliction and hard tempering, and says that hoping to gain freedom without effort is nothing more than lunatic ravings.
Yeah.
So my question is, why does the path to freedom have to involve lunatic ravings and great affliction?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes perfect sense, even if it's incredibly uncomfortable.
Right.
The author introduces a vital concept here, moving from the realm of necessity to the realm of freedom.
The realm of necessity. Is it like the daily grind, the taxes, the societal expectations, the compromises we make just to keep the lights on?
It is all of that, plus the intellectual and spiritual frameworks we inherit without questioning.
Oh, like the Dharma we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Think about the systems the text explicitly tells you to say no to. Theories, sermons, programs. We're all born into a realm of necessity. We conform to our family's expectations, our culture's definitions of success, our economic systems. We do what is necessary to survive and fit in.
Sure, we all do that.
But the text issues a terrifying warning here. If you allow those inherited systems to restrict your soul or spirit, you are functionally reduced to the status of a slave.
Wow.
And a slave has no freedom to choose their community or their labor.
So breaking out of those systems is going to hurt.
It is going to cause massive upheaval. Breaking out of the realm of necessity requires actively fighting against established norms.
Right.
It means looking at the script you were handed, that Dharma, and tearing it up. And that requires saying no to people you might deeply care about, or walking away from a lucrative but soul-crushing career, or rejecting a sermon you were raised to believe.
And when you do that, to the people still operating inside that realm of necessity, you look like a lunatic.
Exactly. When someone walks away from a safe, conventional life to pursue their true frequency, society often views it as lunatic ravings.
Yeah, they think you've lost your mind.
Right. And that friction, that social rejection and internal doubt is the great affliction. It is inherently painful to individuate.
I see.
The author is saying that true freedom is a fortress you have to build through hard tempering, fire, and conflict, because the gravity of the world will constantly try to pull you back into conformity.
You really have to go through the fire to forge the armor.
Yeah.
And it's not the heavy medieval armor of the ego we talked about earlier. It's a protective shell around your autonomy. Because without that fiercely defended freedom, you can't choose the tuning forks that bring you joy. And you can't choose the labor that brings you happiness.
Precisely. Freedom is the shield that makes the first two pillars possible.
Okay, so let's recap where we are. We've stripped away our ego to enter the game. We found our frequency to generate joy. We've labored to create happiness. We've fought through the affliction to forge our freedom.
Right.
Are we done? Is that the end of the game? What is left?
There is one final capstone. The author calls this ultimate stage blessing.
Ah, blessing. And just like everything else in this roadmap, there is a clear, uncompromising mathematical formula for achieving it.
Yes, there is.
The text says blessing derives entirely from unselfish devotion. It states, quote, "The more unselfish devotion one makes to mankind and all lives, the more blessing he will have." Conversely, a selfish and self-centered person who lives only for themselves will, quote, "never experience the feeling of blessing."
It is a directly proportional relationship. Maximum unselfish service equals maximum blessing. Zero service equals zero blessing.
So what does this all mean? Like, when I read this formula, it actually made me think of breathing.
Breathing. How so?
Yeah, well, you can't just take a massive deep breath and hold it in forever.
Right, you'd pass out.
Exactly. If you try to hoard that oxygen like a selfish person, hoarding their energy or their resources, their time or their joy, you aren't going to thrive. You literally have to exhale.
Oh, I like
You have to push that breath, that unselfish service, out into the world to physically make room in your lungs to inhale the next breath, which is the blessing. The exhale is the service, the inhale is the blessing. It has to be a cycle.
That breathing metaphor captures the vital, continuous nature of what the author is describing perfectly. You cannot stockpile blessing. It's dynamic.
Right.
The text explicitly says the person who forgets themselves in service to all lives is the most blessed person in the world. But you know what I find most analytically brilliant about this final pillar? How it perfectly closes the loop with the very first prerequisite we discussed.
Oh, the entry fee. Clearing the board.
Yes. Remember, to even step onto the playing board, you had to get rid of your ego, your personality, your desire for possession, and your jealousy.
Right, taking off the medieval armor.
Exactly. And why was that so critical? Because a person who is obsessed with their own ego, someone who is heavily armored and constantly defending their possessions, is fundamentally incapable of unselfish devotion.
Because they're too full of themselves.
Right. If you are full of yourself, your lungs are already full, using your metaphor. You can't take in any blessing.
Wow. So the prerequisite to enter the game is the exact psychological tool you need to win the final stage of the game.
Exactly. By demanding you drop the self at the very beginning, the author is preparing you for the final capstone.
That is wild.
Right. Through the joy of your community, the happiness of your labor, and the security of your freedom, you reach a state where you are completely fulfilled, yet entirely light and empty of ego. So you're finally capable of giving yourself away entirely in service to mankind, not out of a grudging sense of obligation, but as a natural exhale. And through that total giving away, you achieve the ultimate state of blessing.
It is a stunning piece of philosophical architecture. I mean, it is a complete, tightly sealed, closed-loop system.
Yeah.
You have to be empty to start so you can be a conduit at the end.
It really is an incredibly rigorous roadmap. It demands immense intentionality, bravery, and discipline at every single step.
It really does. It is definitely not the buffet where you just pick whatever fits into your weekend schedule, that's for sure.
Absolutely not.
So let's summarize the rules of this specific game for you to take away. Feng's 2010 framework dictates that to even step onto the field, you must drop your ego, your jealousy, and your rigid personality.
Right.
Once you're incredibly light and neutral, you have to find a collective on your exact frequency to experience the resonance of joy. You must actively overcome friction through labor and creation to generate happiness. You must fiercely fight through the affliction of breaking societal norms to build the fortress of your freedom.
And finally,
You must exhale all of that accumulated energy in unselfish service to achieve blessing.
it is a profound sequence that challenges almost every default setting of modern life.
It absolutely does. And as we wrap up our analysis of this text today, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over based on everything we've unpacked.
Yeah, if we entertain the author's premise that life is indeed a game governed by these physical and spiritual laws, and specifically that true joy relies entirely on finding a collective with your exact frequency and resonance, it forces a rather uncomfortable audit of our own lives.
It really does.
Think about your day-to-day routine right now. How much of your current exhaustion, your burnout, or your lack of joy isn't actually a failure of your character, but simply the result of you trying to play your unique game on someone else's frequency?
Are you striking your tuning fork in the wrong room? It's a really powerful question to ask yourself. Well, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating journey through a rigid, uncompromising, yet incredibly thoughtful philosophical roadmap. We encourage you to keep questioning the systems and necessities around you, keep actively laboring to create, and keep exploring the sources that shape our world. We'll catch you next time.